There is a single soil test that costs less than $5 and tells you exactly why the hydrangea in your front yard bloomed pink last year and blue this year. There's a specific mineral in your dirt that paints your flower petals a different color based on one measurable value. It is called the aluminum pH relationship. It is the same chemistry that turned your neighbor's hydrangeas cobalt blue while yours stayed rose pink. Let's dive in. Right now, the average American homeowner spends between $200 and $600 a year on decorative landscaping plants. Hydrangeas alone account for one of the top 3 selling ornamental shrubs at every big box nursery in the United States. A single-potted big-leaf hydrangea, the species that changes color, retails between $20 and $65 depending on size and cultivar. And if you have ever walked into a garden center in spring and picked up a hydrangea because the tag said blue or purple or pink, you already know what happens next. You get the plant home, you dig a hole, you water it faithfully for 3 years. And by the 4th season, the flowers are a completely different color than the tag promised. The blue plant blooms pink, the purple plant blooms muddy lavender, the pink plant blooms a sickly gray-white. And when you call the nursery to complain, they suggest you buy their $18 hydrangea color booster. When that fails, they suggest you replace the plant. That is not gardening. That is a subscription plan disguised as horticulture. And the modern American ornamental plant industry is not exactly transparent about the reason. Big leaf hydrangea flower color is one of the most well-documented plant chemistry phenomena in the entire botanical literature. Peer-reviewed research on the aluminum pH mechanism has been published continuously since the 1930s. Modern papers, including a landmark 2021 study by Japanese plant scientist Kumi Yoshida in the Proceedings of the Japan Academy Series B, have mapped the molecular pathway in extraordinary detail. Yet the average consumer who spends $50 on a hydrangea has never been handed a single-page explanation of how the plant actually works. You're paying more than ever for ornamental shrubs whose behavior is completely predictable from a $5 test kit that no employee has ever recommended you buy. The chemistry beneath your feet has been controlling hydrangea flower color since before your grandmother was born. It does not require expensive additives. It does not need proprietary boosters. And it does not care whether you buy your plants at a chain store or an independent nursery. But the real question is not whether the aluminum pH mechanism works. The molecular science on that was settled decades ago. The real question is what happens when you finally test the soil under your hydrangea and understand what the number is telling you. And that is where this knowledge stops being an academic curiosity and starts being a threat to a $50 billion ornamental horticulture industry. Because once you understand it, you never buy a hydrangea color booster again. But to see why, you need to understand the chemistry. Because once you see how simple the mechanism actually is, you will never look at a hydrangea petal the same way again. Hydrangea macrophylla, the species commonly called bigleaf hydrangea, produces its color through a natural plant pigment called delphinidin. That word sounds like a laboratory chemical, but the compound itself is one of the most common blue-purple pigments in the plant kingdom. Delphinidin belongs to a family of molecules called anthocyanins, which are responsible for the red, purple, and blue colors of blueberries, grapes, red cabbage, and countless flowers. Here is what happens inside a hydrangea petal. When delphinidin exists alone in the flower's vacuole, the cellular compartment where pigments are stored, it produces a red or pink color. When delphinidin bonds with a single aluminum ion, plus 2 accompanying co-pigment molecules called 5-Bordeaux-P-coumaroyl-quinic acid and 3-cafe-oil-quinic acid, the entire molecular complex shifts its light absorption. The bond changes how the molecule interacts with photons of visible light. What entered your eye as red-pink light now enters as deep blue. The pigment did not change. The molecule bonded to a metal, and the metal changed the color. This is not opinion. This is peer-reviewed chemistry, mapped in molecular detail by researchers at Nagoya University and published in multiple international journals. The question is not whether the reaction happens. The question is when aluminum becomes available to bond with delphinidin, and that answer sits inside your soil. Soil pH is a measurement of the concentration of hydrogen ions in soil water. It runs on a scale from 0 to 14, with 7 being neutral. Below 7 is acidic, above 7 is alkaline. When soil pH drops below approximately 5.5, aluminum ions that were locked into soil mineral compounds begin dissolving into the soil water. Those dissolved aluminum ions travel with water into plant roots, up through the stems, and into the petals. There they bond with delphinidin, and the flowers turn blue. When soil pH rises above approximately 6.5, aluminum locks back into insoluble compounds. The roots cannot absorb it. The petals contain only free delphinidin. The flowers stay pink. That is the entire mechanism. One mineral, one pH threshold, one pigment. and the visible result, blue or pink, that anyone walking past your yard can see from 30 feet away. A single hydrangea shrub planted at the corner of a foundation wall, where lime from the concrete leaches into the surrounding soil, will consistently produce pink flowers because the pH stays above 6.5. A hydrangea planted 12 feet away under an oak tree where fallen leaves have acidified the soil for years will produce blue flowers because the pH stays below 5.5. Same plant, same cultivar, same season, 2 colors. That is not a failure of gardening. That is a real-time chemistry readout of your dirt. And once you can read it, you never need to be surprised by a hydrangea again. And unlike modern synthetic garden fertilizers that need reapplication every 4 to 6 weeks, the aluminum pH relationship is a permanent condition of your soil. Once you adjust pH, the color stays put for the rest of that growing season, and often multiple seasons afterward. In a region with normal rainfall, that means your hydrangea color becomes something you actually control instead of something you merely observe. Now, there is a second reason this knowledge was quietly buried, and most homeowners have never heard the full explanation. During the 1800s, bigleaf hydrangea was one of the most popular ornamental shrubs across Europe and North America. Victorian estate gardeners in England had already discovered by the 1870s that adding iron filings, aluminum shavings from tin can factories, or aluminum sulfate to soil around hydrangeas produced dramatic blue coloration. British gardening publications, including the Journal of Horticulture and Cottage Gardener, printed detailed instructions throughout the late 1800s. The German gardening literature was even more advanced. By 1900, German horticulturists had documented specific dosing rates for aluminum sulfate application, target soil pH ranges, and expected color response times. That is not folklore. That is documented Victorian and Edwardian horticultural science, preserved in botanical library archives at Kew Gardens, the Royal Horticultural Society, and the New York Botanical Garden. But if you think bigleaf hydrangea color chemistry begins in Europe, you are off by centuries. The species is native to Japan and southern China, where it was cultivated in imperial gardens for at least 800 years before European traders introduced it to the West. Japanese botanists documented the color change phenomenon in Edo period manuscripts dating to the 1600s and 1700s. They called the plant ajisai and described its color variation across garden locations with the same precision Western scientists would later apply. The Japanese even developed cultivars specifically bred to display multiple colors on the same shrub, exploiting the natural variation in soil pH across a garden bed. Modern research at Nagoya University, Kyoto University, and the Japanese National Institute of Genetics has built directly on that Edo period observational tradition. By the 1950s, nearly every major horticultural science program on the planet was publishing research on hydrangea color chemistry. The mechanism was documented, the dosing was calibrated, the soil chemistry was mapped. Then, over the next 50 years, something strange happened. The knowledge quietly disappeared from the average consumer's understanding of the plant. Garden centers stopped teaching it. Nursery employees stopped mentioning it. Plant tags began printing color designations as though they were permanent varietal features rather than reversible chemical states. You can produce dramatic blue to pink or pink to blue color changes in your own yard using a $5 test kit and a $12 bag of soil amendment. And yet almost none of this appears in a modern American garden center conversation. Now, fast forward to the man who documented the exact molecular structure of the hydrangea color complex. In 2003, a research team led by Kumi Yoshida at Nagoya University in Japan published a peer-reviewed paper that finally answered a question chemists had been debating for over 100 years. What is the exact molecular structure of the blue pigment inside a hydrangea petal? The team used a technique called nuclear magnetic resonance spectroscopy to map every atom. They confirmed the presence of one delphinidin molecule, 3 aluminum ions, and 2 accompanying acid molecules bound in a specific 3-dimensional configuration. That complex is what your eye perceives as cobalt blue. In 2021, the same research group published a follow-up study in the Proceedings of the Japan Academy Series B, further refining the chemistry and explaining exactly how pH controls aluminum solubility at the soil-root interface. Now, if you were thinking this level of scientific detail must have made its way into mainstream American gardening publications, you would be almost entirely wrong. The Yoshida research is public, it is free, it is available through the National Institutes of Health's PubMed Central Archive with a single search. Yet the average American homeowner has never heard the word delphinidin, has never seen a photograph of the aluminum delphinidin complex, and has never been told that a $5 soil test would answer every question they have ever had about their hydrangea. Modern testing has confirmed the Yoshida findings across multiple universities and continents. The University of Georgia Cooperative Extension has published detailed technical bulletins on hydrangea soil pH management, complete with target pH ranges, aluminum sulfate application rates, and expected color response timelines. The University of Iowa Libraries hosts one of the most cited public-facing explanations of the chemistry. American Scientist, the journal of the Sigma Xi Scientific Society, has published accessible articles walking readers through the molecular mechanism. Washington State University Puyallup has published a downloadable PDF specifically on the pH-nutrient aluminum relationship in hydrangeas. The data is public. It is peer-reviewed. It is available at no cost through university websites that most homeowners never think to search. Separately, botanical gardens, including the Missouri Botanical Garden, the Chicago Botanic Garden, and the Royal Horticultural Society in the United Kingdom, maintain detailed hydrangea color management guides for their own display collections. Every one of these institutions produces perfect cobalt blue or vivid rose pink flowers year after year by controlling soil chemistry precisely. They do not use proprietary garden center boosters. They use aluminum sulfate, garden sulfur, and lime, purchased in bulk agricultural quantities for pennies per pound. Every one of these examples is documented, published, and verifiable. And yet the total shelf space devoted to explaining hydrangea color chemistry at any major American garden center remains effectively zero. So, if this science has been settled for 100 years and confirmed by every major botanical institution on the planet, why isn't there a single tag on a single hydrangea pot that explains it? Because the system was never designed to accommodate something. You can control yourself with a $5 test kit and a $12 bag of aluminum sulfate. The modern American ornamental plant market runs on branded plants with recognizable cultivar names, standardized retail displays, licensed distribution channels, and proprietary marketing programs. Understanding soil chemistry is not on that list. Not because it fails, because a customer who understands soil chemistry stops buying overpriced color booster products. A customer who understands soil chemistry stops replacing hydrangeas that supposedly failed. A customer who understands soil chemistry stops calling landscape services to solve problems a $5 test kit would have identified in 10 minutes. There is no marketing budget in commodity chemistry education. There is no premium price point in a bag of aluminum sulfate that costs the same at every hardware store. There is no way to build a proprietary product moat around knowledge that any botany textbook explains for free. Without brand differentiation, there is no advertising budget. Without advertising budget, there is no consumer education. Without consumer education, there is no awareness. This is not a conspiracy. It is something more subtle. It is structural silence. The American ornamental horticulture market generates over $50 billion a year in revenue. That revenue depends on repeat plant purchases, seasonal color products, branded fertilizers, professional landscape services, and the ongoing customer confusion that fuels every one of those categories. Every dollar that flows through that system passes through equipment and inventory that someone owns, maintains, and invoices for. A $5 soil test generates no ongoing revenue. A homeowner who understands aluminum solubility requires no color booster. A hydrangea whose pH has been correctly adjusted needs no replacement. These outcomes create no recurring revenue stream for any party at any point in the supply chain. From the perspective of the modern ornamental plant economy, an informed hydrangea owner is not a competitor. They are a lost customer. They do not fit into the financial architecture, and therefore they do not exist within the marketing architecture. No one conspired to hide the science. The frameworks that govern American garden retail were simply written for products that scale, products that can be trademarked, packaged in proprietary containers, and sold on repeat purchase cycles. Knowledge you can absorb in 10 minutes from a peer-reviewed paper does not clear a single one of those gates. And so it vanishes. Not suppressed, just never sold. Now, if you're thinking soil chemistry sounds too technical to matter in your life, stop and consider what you actually need to grow the hydrangea color you want. You need to know your current soil pH. You need to know your target pH. You need to know which amendment moves pH in which direction. You need to know how much to apply. You need to know when to expect visible color change. Every one of those requirements is answered by a $5 test kit and a 5-minute online reading of any university extension service publication. None of them require a $40 professional soil analysis. None of them require a monthly landscape service call. None of them require an $18 bottle of proprietary color booster. If you want to take direct control of your hydrangea color today, we put together a full manual that covers everything in this video and more. The link is in the description below. Here is how the testing and adjustment works. You need 3 things. First, a soil test kit. Basic pH test kits are available at every hardware store, garden center, and online retailer for between $4 and $8. More sensitive digital pH meters cost between $15 and $30 and last for years. For most homeowners, a simple color strip test kit provides plenty of accuracy. Second, the amendment. To make hydrangeas bluer, you lower soil pH by adding aluminum sulfate at approximately 1 tablespoon per gallon of water, applied around the drip line of the plant in spring and again in early summer. A 5-pound bag of aluminum sulfate costs between $10 and $15 and treats multiple large hydrangeas for an entire season. Alternatively, elemental garden sulfur works slower but arguably safer at approximately half a cup per plant applied in early spring. To make hydrangeas pinker, you raise soil pH by adding garden lime at approximately 1 cup per plant, applied in fall or early spring. A bag of garden lime costs between $6 and $10 and lasts multiple seasons. Third, the timing. Soil pH adjustments do not produce overnight results in the literal sense. Chemical shifts move through soil water over weeks. Aluminum uptake by roots then requires additional weeks. Full color response typically appears within 1 full growing season, sometimes across 2 seasons for dramatic reversals. Plan accordingly. Total cost for a complete season of hydrangea color management on a modest home garden comes in under $25 in materials at current U.S. retail prices. Compare that to $60 to $150 for proprietary color booster products and professional soil consultations. That is not a discount. That is a different economic universe. One critical warning. Aluminum sulfate is safe when applied at recommended rates, but can lower soil pH more than expected in already acidic soil. Test before applying. Do not apply repeatedly without retesting. Excessive aluminum in soil can damage other plants, particularly vegetables and lawn grasses growing in nearby beds. Keep applications localized to the hydrangea drip line. Wear gloves when handling and store the product out of reach of children and pets. There are real limits, and you should know them. Not every hydrangea species changes color. Panicle hydrangeas, oakleaf hydrangeas, and smooth hydrangeas do not respond to soil chemistry the way bigleaf hydrangeas do. Their colors are genetically fixed. White hydrangeas remain white regardless of soil pH. Only Hydrangea macrophylla and Hydrangea serrata, the mountain hydrangea, produce reliable color changes in response to soil chemistry. If you own a different species, no amount of aluminum sulfate will change the color. That is not a failure of the mechanism. It is a difference in the underlying plant biology. The aluminum pH relationship is a 400-year-old answer to a question the modern ornamental horticulture industry was never designed to teach. It does not replace all aspects of good gardening or compete with the marketing of premium plant varieties. But for the cost of a soil test and a small bag of amendment, it gives you real control over one of the most visible garden features you will ever plant. Using the same chemistry that Edo period Japanese botanists documented in the 1600s and that Kumi Yoshida's team mapped molecule by molecule in modern peer-reviewed research. A lot of what this channel covers was nearly lost, not because it stopped working, but because the system was never designed to accommodate knowledge that does not generate a monthly invoice. If discovering the lost science of self-directed gardening matters to you, subscribing and sharing is the simplest way to make sure this kind of knowledge keeps being found. If you had a $5 soil test kit and a $12 bag of aluminum sulfate, would you take direct chemical control of your hydrangea's color for the cost of a fast food lunch? Or would you still call a landscape service and pay $150 for advice you could have found in a 2021 Japanese peer-reviewed paper? I would genuinely like to know. Drop it in the comments.